Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something really important for pretty much everyone who uses software.
Mm-hmm.
And these days, that's pretty much all of us.
Yeah, that's true.
We're diving into the world of software security maturity models.
Okay.
And you can kind of think about these models like leveling up in a video game.
Oh, interesting.
But instead of like gaining powers,
Yeah.
companies are gaining better security practices.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so these models help organizations understand, where they stand when it comes to software security.
Right.
And they kind of give them like a roadmap of how they can improve.
It's like a guide to making sure that the software they're building is secure and reliable.
Exactly. And the source material for this deep dive is a book called Secure and Resilient Software Development.
Okay.
And it actually talks about two of the leading maturity models out there,
Uh-huh.
OWASP's OpenSAMM and then also the BSIMM.
Okay.
So we're going to unpack each of those models,
Yeah.
what they offer, how they're different from each other,
Right.
and ultimately why this should matter to you.
I think something that gets missed a lot is just the importance of starting,
Yeah.
like just getting on the path.
Yeah.
Jeremy Epstein, he's a senior computer scientist at SRI International.
Okay.
And he says that, moving in the direction of either of these models,
Mm-hmm.
OpenSAMM or BSIMM, will really help any organization improve.
Right.
And that if you're just waiting around, for things to settle down, you're just going to fall behind.
So don't wait, get started now.
Exactly.
So let's kick things off with OpenSAMM.
Okay.
And one of the things that stands out to me about OpenSAMM is how flexible it is.
Oh,
Like it can be tailored to different organizations of all sizes, whether you're like a small startup or a huge company.
Right.
And it can also be used with different ways of developing software.
Okay.
So if you're using Agile, if you're using Waterfall.
It's all about finding a way to make a really strong security program that fits the organization.
Exactly.
And OpenSAMM does that by focusing on four main activities: governance, construction, verification, and deployment.
Okay. So those are like the four pillars.
Kind of the foundation for your security work.
So can you give us like a concrete example of how one of those plays out?
Sure. Let's say you're starting a new software project.
Okay.
OpenSAMM has this practice called security requirements,
Mm-hmm.
which is part of the construction activity.
Okay.
And it really pushes the idea that you need to think about security needs right from the beginning.
Okay.
So defining what your security goals are for the project,
Uh-huh.
what kind of threats you might face,
Mm-hmm.
and setting up rules for how developers should code securely.
So security is not an afterthought. It's like baked in from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. It's woven into the project.
Gotcha.
And each of those four main activities,
Okay.
they're broken down even further into 3 security practices.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a total of 12 key areas
Okay.
to work on. For example, under governance, you have strategy and metrics, you have policy and compliance, and education and guidance.
So it's like breaking down this big challenge of software security
Yeah.
into these smaller bite-sized pieces.
It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
Exactly, one bite at a time.
And then within each of those practice areas,
Uh-huh.
there are multiple maturity levels, right?
Yes, exactly. Each one has 3 maturity levels.
Okay.
They go from 0 to 3.
And so 0 is like
0 means you're not doing anything in that area,
Okay.
and 3 is like,
you've mastered it.
yeah, you're like a pro.
Gotcha.
And to move up those levels, you need to do certain things.
Like what?
You need to set clear objectives,
Okay.
do the right activities,
Uh-huh.
show that you're getting results,
Mm-hmm.
and even think about costs and personnel.
So it's not just checking boxes. It's like
Mhm.
really demonstrating that you're making progress.
It's about making sure your security efforts are actually working in practice.
So how does an organization figure out where they stand on this maturity scale?
OpenSAMM has these assessment worksheets,
Okay.
and you can use those to figure out your current maturity level
Or
for each practice.
so you answer some questions.
Yeah, it's like a security checkup,
Interesting.
and then you get a score.
And then based on those scores, you get a visual representation?
Yeah, they have this thing called a scorecard,
Okay.
and it shows you like a snapshot of your overall maturity.
Gotcha.
You can even compare those scorecards over time
Mm-hmm.
to see how much you've improved.
That's really helpful because you can actually see the progress you're making.
Yeah, visualization is powerful.
So let's say an organization realizes that they've got some work to do.
Uh-huh.
Where do they go from there?
OpenSAMM also provides these roadmap templates,
Okay.
and they're customized for different types of organizations,
Like what kind of organization?
like software vendors,
Uh-huh.
online service providers,
Okay.
even government agents.
So they've got a bunch of different options.
Yeah, these roadmaps are like your personalized training plan,
Okay.
and they break down the improvement process into these manageable phases.
Okay.
So you decide which practices to focus on first, what maturity level you're aiming for,
Okay.
and then you start working on it.
So it's not just about assessment, it's also about what you can actually do to get better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about giving organizations the power to manage their own security journey.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's switch gears a little bit
Yep.
and talk about BSIMM,
Okay.
Building Security in Maturity Model.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is a bit different.
In what way?
From what I understand, it's based on data from real companies.
That's right. It's based on real-world data gathered from 9 major software companies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like Adobe,
Mm-hmm.
EMC,
Mm.
Google,
Oh,
Microsoft, and 5 others.
so these are like the big players.
Yeah, they're the leaders in the industry.
And so instead of prescribing like specific actions, BSIMM is more about showing what's working.
Yeah, it gives you a glimpse into what these successful companies are actually doing.
So it's kind of like learning from the best in the business.
Exactly. It's all about seeing what works in practice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how does this model differ structurally from OpenSAMM?
So BSIMM organizes its activities into 4 domains:
Okay.
governance intelligence, SSDL touchpoints, and deployment.
Those sound pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, they cover the entire software lifecycle,
So from the very beginning,
from planning
all the way to the end.
all the way to releasing and maintaining the software.
So it sounds like BSIMM really emphasizes taking this holistic approach to software security.
Yeah, thinking about security at every stage.
And another thing that I found really interesting about BSIMM is that it emphasizes having a dedicated software security group.
Yes, that's a crucial part.
And that should be about 1%
Around 1%.
of the development organization.
That's the average size.
Yeah, they're like the security champions.
Exactly. They guide and mentor the rest of the team.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it sounds like BSIMM really advocates for this idea of educating and empowering developers
Yes.
rather than like policing them for making mistakes.
It's about fostering a culture of security, awareness, and collaboration.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's break down these BSIMM domains a little bit further.
Okay. So good.
Starting with governance.
Okay.
This seems to be about making sure security is really a core part of how the organization runs.
That's right. It's about having a clear security strategy,
Mm-hmm.
defining metrics to track your progress,
Mm-hmm.
making sure you're following regulations,
Right.
and setting up policies that everyone understands.
So it's like setting the tone from the top down.
Exactly. Leadership needs to make security a priority.
Now, what about intelligence?
Oh.
Intelligence.
It sounds kind of like a spy movie.
Well, in a way, it is.
Really?
It's all about knowing your enemy,
Oh, okay.
understanding the threats you face, the attackers who might target you. Uh-huh.
And the weak spots in your systems.
So it's kind of like doing your homework.
Yeah, you got to understand the security landscape.
Gotcha.
You know what kind of attacks are happening,
Mm-hmm.
who's behind them,
Right.
and what vulnerabilities they might try to exploit.
So you've laid the groundwork with governance. You've gathered intel with intelligence. What happens next?
That's where SSDL touchpoints come in.
SSDL touchpoints. Okay.
That's a bit of a mouthful,
Yeah.
but it basically means integrating security into every part of the software development process.
So from the moment the code is written
Yes.
all the way to when the software is released.
And even beyond.
Wow. Okay.
So we're talking about things like analyzing the architecture early on
Mm-hmm.
to catch any design flaws,
Okay.
doing code reviews
Right.
where other developers check for vulnerabilities,
Mm-hmm.
and, of course, rigorous security testing.
To try to break your own software before someone else does.
Exactly. So you're really trying to make security a part of every step of the development process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the final domain is deployment.
Deployment.
So this is all about making sure the software stays secure
Uh-huh.
even after it's been released.
Exactly. So
Okay.
configuring servers correctly, managing vulnerabilities,
Okay.
and having a plan for when security incidents happen.
So you can't just set it and forget it.
No, you need to constantly monitor and adapt.
Right, because the threat landscape is constantly changing.
Exactly. Security is an ongoing process.
So we've got these 4 domains, but I'm kind of curious to dig deeper into some of the specific practices that fall within those domains.
We could look at how they translate into real-world actions.
Yeah.
And how they can help companies achieve higher levels of security maturity.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
Okay, so we've talked about the 4 domains of BSIMM governance, intelligence, SSDL touchpoints, and deployment. And these domains are broken down even further, right?
That's right. Just like OpenSAMM, each of these areas has 3 maturity levels.
Okay.
From level 1 to level 3.
Gotcha.
With level 3 being the most mature.
And what I find really helpful about BSIMM is that it actually gives you examples of what you do at each of these maturity levels. It's not just like a concept.
Yeah,
exactly. It actually tells you, like, what does good security look like in practice?
It shows you what other companies are doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's take a look at the strategy and metrics practice area,
Okay.
which falls under governance.
Under governance.
So at level 1, one of the activities is to actually write down your software security process.
Okay.
And make sure everyone in the organization knows about it.
That's important. You need to be transparent about your security practices.
Yeah. So you're establishing that baseline and making sure that everyone understands what's expected of them.
Everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then at level 2, you start implementing what are called security gates in your development process.
So that's where you actually stop a project if it doesn't meet certain security requirements.
Exactly. You're enforcing those security standards and you're preventing those vulnerabilities from slipping through.
You're catching those issues early on.
Yeah.
Right.
And then at level 3, you have a system for tracking the progress of all your software projects.
Oh, okay.
So you can generate these reports and see where things stand.
So you have like a bird's eye view of everything.
Exactly. You know which projects are on track, which ones need attention, and you know where to focus your efforts.
It's all about having that data to make smart decisions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about this practice area called attack models.
Oh, attack models.
It sounds kind of intriguing.
So this one's all about thinking like an attacker.
Really?
Yeah.
So at level 1, you start by making a list of the top attacks that could happen.
All right.
Okay.
So like what are the most common ways that hackers might try to break into your systems?
So you're trying to anticipate what the bad guys might do.
Exactly.
Okay.
You got to be proactive.
And then at level 2, you actually develop these detailed attack patterns.
So you're not just thinking about what could happen, but also who might do it.
Oh, okay.
You're profiling the attackers.
So you're thinking about their motives, their capabilities, and then how they might attack you.
It helps you build better defenses.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now at level 3.
Level 3.
This is where things get really cool.
Okay.
You actually create these specialized science teams.
These are like your elite hackers.
Whoa. So they're like ethical hackers.
Exactly. They're trying to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
So they're like the good guys who hack.
Yeah, they're the white hats.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So how do you measure your progress with BSIMM?
So they use these things called spider graphs.
It's a spider graph.
And they show you your maturity level for each practice area.
Okay.
And you can compare that to the average maturity.
Oh, so you can see how you stack up against those 9 companies that we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a good way to see your strengths and weaknesses.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And for organizations that are just getting started with BSIMM, they actually have a bunch of free resources on our website.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they've got Excel templates so you can collect your own data.
Oh.
And they even have this BSIMM Begin survey.
Which gives you like a quick snapshot of where you stand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, earlier we briefly touched upon how BSIMM was incorporated into a toolkit for the financial services sector.
Right.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so back in 2009,
okay,
a group of security experts got together and they formed this thing called the Supply Chain Working Group.
Supply Chain Working Group.
Okay. It was a joint effort by the Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council and the Financial and Banking Information Infrastructure Committee.
So they were trying to address this concern about software supply chain security.
Yeah, they were worried about vulnerabilities in third-party software.
Because even if a financial institution has great security practices,
Right.
if one of their vendors has a vulnerability,
Exactly.
it could compromise the whole system.
It's like a chain.
Yeah.
The weakest link can break the whole thing.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So they developed a toolkit that was based on BSIMM and other best practices.
Yeah.
And this toolkit provided guidance on how to secure software from different sources.
So they broke it down into 4 channels.
Okay.
Software you develop yourself, software developed by a third party,
Yep.
off-the-shelf software, and then hardware, firmware, and appliances.
So they were really trying to cover all the bases,
Yeah.
recognizing that software comes from a lot of different places.
And each source has its own unique security challenges.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And to create this toolkit, they actually started by surveying.
It surveyed a bunch of financial institutions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
To see what they were already doing?
Mm-hmm.
And to identify any gaps?
Yeah, to see where they needed to improve.
Oh, okay.
And then they brought in subject matter experts to analyze the data and come up with recommendations.
So they used both industry data and expert insight.
Exactly. It was a collaborative effort.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so BSIMM played a big role in shaping those recommendations.
Yeah, especially for internally developed software. And software that companies buy from vendors.
So this is a great example of how BSIMM can be adapted to different industries.
Yeah.
And it shows how you can use it to promote a more secure software ecosystem.
It's all about working together.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And the best part is...
What's that?
The toolkit is available for free.
Oh, that's awesome.
Anyone can download it and use it.
That's great.
Yeah.
It shows how much the financial industry cares about security.
And it's a great example of collaboration and knowledge sharing.
Definitely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked about OpenSAMM and BSIMM, what are your thoughts on the key differences between those two models?
So they're both really valuable,
Okay.
but they have different strengths.
Gotcha.
And they're suited for different situations.
So how would you compare them?
Well, OpenSAMM is really flexible and customizable.
Okay.
So it's a good starting point for companies that are new to this whole security thing.
It's like the beginner's guide.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
BSIMM, on the other hand, it's more about showing what works in the real world. It's for companies that are already pretty mature in terms of security.
So it's like the advanced course.
Yeah, it's about learning from the experts.
Gotcha.
The people who are already doing it well.
So which model you choose really depends on where your organization is at.
Exactly.
Okay.
What your goals are and how mature your security practices are.
That makes sense. But no matter which model you choose, the most important thing is to actually use it.
Don't just read about it. You got to put it into practice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Security is not a one-time thing.
No.
It's a journey.
It's a process of continuous improvement.
Well said. I like that.
Thanks.
Now, I want to shift gears for a second.
Okay.
And think about something.
What's that?
That came to mind while we were talking.
Okay.
We've talked about how these models can help individual companies improve their security.
Right.
But what if every software company in the world adopted these models?
Oh, wow.
What kind of impact would that have on the industry as a whole?
That's an interesting question.
It's kind of like asking, what if everyone ate healthy and exercised regularly?
Yeah.
Would we eliminate all diseases?
Probably not, but we'd be a lot healthier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even if we can't get rid of all security risks, widespread adoption of these models could really raise the bar for software security.
It would make security a fundamental requirement.
And it would allow people to actually compare the security of different software providers.
Yeah.
So they can make more informed choices.
It would empower consumers.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that could incentivize companies to actually prioritize security.
Yeah, because they know that consumers are paying attention.
Exactly.
That's a great point.
Imagine a world where software is just inherently more secure.
Yeah.
Where data breaches are less common, and we can all use technology with more confidence.
That would be amazing.
But that's a big vision.
It is.
And realistically, it would take a lot of effort to get there.
Yeah. It would require a major shift in mindset.
And a commitment to collaboration.
Definitely.
But I think it's a vision worth striving for.
Absolutely.
So what can our listeners do
to help make this happen?
To contribute to this vision?
Well, they can start by advocating for these models within their own organizations.
Okay.
If they're developers, they can push for secure coding practices. If they're managers, they can make security a priority in their budgets.
Right.
And if they're just users, they can demand more transparency from the companies that make the software they use.
So every little bit helps.
Exactly. Every action counts.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, as we've been talking about these different models and these different practices, I keep thinking about how much actually goes into building secure software.
Yeah.
It's not just about like writing clean code or anything like that.
Right.
It's about really anticipating threats, thinking like an attacker, and building those defenses into the software from the very beginning.
Yeah, designing security in from day one.
Which actually reminds me.
Oh, yeah?
We were going to take a closer look at one of those specific BSIMM practice areas.
Yes, we were. Which one are you thinking about?
Well, the one that caught my eye was security features and design.
Oh, security features and design. That's a good one.
It sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's where you really start to bake security
Mm-hmm.
into the very foundation of your software.
Okay.
So at that most basic level, level 1,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about setting those ground rules,
Okay.
establishing those standards, and documenting everything.
So things like authentication protocols,
Yes.
how roles and permissions are managed,
Uh-huh.
key management,
Mm-hmm.
logging practices,
All those foundational security elements.
cryptography standards,
Yeah.
even specifying secure communication protocols.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're creating these blueprints for secure building blocks.
Yeah, so you don't have every development team kind of figuring these things out on their own
Right.
and potentially making the same mistake.
Exactly. You want consistency, and you want to avoid those common pitfalls.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And at this level, the Software Security Group, or SSG,
Mm-hmm.
starts working directly with the architecture teams.
So security is part of the design discussion right from the get-go.
You want to catch those issues early on?
Yes, definitely.
When they're easier to fix.
It's a lot cheaper to fix a security flaw in the design phase
Yeah,
than it is to try to patch it up after the software's already been released.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, what about level 2?
So at level 2,
Mm-hmm.
things get a bit more advanced.
Okay.
The focus shifts to actually building secure by design frameworks
Oh, okay.
and reusable components.
So you're not just thinking about individual security features anymore. You're thinking about how they all work together.
Exactly. It's about creating a secure ecosystem.
Okay.
So this might involve things like developing secure middleware,
Okay.
creating libraries of reusable security components.
So you're giving developers these pre-approved building blocks
Yeah, exactly.
that they can use to build secure software.
It's like giving them a Lego set where all the pieces are already designed to be secure.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to build something insecure when you're working with those kinds of components.
Exactly. You're setting them up for success.
That's awesome. And at this level, the SSG becomes a real resource for development teams.
They're the go-to experts when it comes to security.
So if a team runs into a tricky design challenge,
Mm-hmm.
they can go to the SSG for guidance.
Exactly. They provide that expertise and support.
And that's really helpful when you're dealing with new technologies
Yeah.
or trying to implement innovative features
Uh-huh.
while still keeping things secure.
It's a delicate balance.
And then at the highest level, level 3,
Level 3.
you're not just suggesting that teams use these secure design principles.
Right.
You're requiring it.
It's not optional anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So usually you have a formal review process
Mhm.
where a board or a committee approves those secure design patterns.
And they're constantly evaluating new technologies,
Yeah.
identifying potential risks,
Hmm.
and updating those guidelines to stay ahead of the curve.
So it's a very proactive approach.
Yeah, you're constantly
It's
evolving.
building
forward.
security into the software.
You're baking it into the DNA of the software.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the world of software security maturity models.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We've learned about OpenSAMM.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned about BSIMM.
Uh-huh.
We've explored how they work.
Yep.
And we've even seen how they're being used in real-world settings.
It's all about making software more secure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key takeaways here
What's that?
is that software security is not just the responsibility of the security team.
Right.
It's everyone's responsibility.
Everyone has a role to play.
From developers to managers to the people who use the software.
We all need to be thinking about security.
I agree.
Yeah.
And by understanding these models
Mm-hmm.
and really embracing that security-first mindset.
We could all contribute to making software more secure and reliable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative
And inspiring.
and inspiring. Until next time, stay curious, stay secure, and keep on learning.